Hi again. Here's a quick fire response video for you. Today I'll be responding to Kulinski and Vaush. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment if you wish. All this helps the algorithm and grows the channel, and remember to hit the notification bell. Karl and Vaush are seen here discussing tankies, aka us, Marxist-Leninists. Let's dive right in.
People who defend China very rarely talk about China. They talk about the United States. They'll criticize the hell out of the US. And don't get me wrong, the USA. I am all here for that. But it's always got to be done in an appropriate context. Because if all you do is, the West does this bad, the West does that bad. Well, I agree, okay? And then you see a couple positive things about China. And it's like, wait, you're not going to talk about China's union breaking or China's violation of civil rights or China's authoritarian. Right. So it's always through implication. And it frustrates me because it feels like so often. I'll give you one example and then I'll stop rambling, okay?
So straight away here, if you're listening closely, we're already been given an insight into the innermost ideological priorities of figures like Vaush, ostensible leftists who, in fact, prostitute themselves for liberalism and imperialism. The politics of rights, human rights, individual liberties, and the socialist world's lack of respect for said rights. This was the same line of attack weaponized by the US State Department against the Soviet Union when discussion of human rights became a defining foreground conversation during the Cold War. Why then are civil rights being weaponized by agents of imperialism? Because they strike a blow at the institutional pillars of nation-states engaged in socialist construction. The politics of right, as it is personified and codified in the West, is antithetical to vanguardism, collectivism, and proletarian democracy. Whenever you spot anyone summoning the politics of right to condemn socialist states, bear in mind the history I've just outlined. This is the standard modus operandi of the imperialist. Vaush also mentions in passing union breaking. Let's remind ourselves first and foremost of the role unions serve in advanced and developing societies. They act as an extra-political and state mechanism to roughly allocate the spoils of production between capital and labour. The success in this task is almost entirely historically contingent. Here in Britain, against the tide of neoliberalism in a state controlled by the bourgeoisie, unions have failed to represent labour adequately. Membership has shrunk, and the real wage stagnation that has brutally afflicted the working class now for decade on decade continues. So why is it that they were once successful and now less so? Because under conditions of post-war social democracy, unions were granted a favourable environment in which to agitate. A large public sector accounted for the majority of union members, and the capitalist class was weakened with the nationalisation of Britain's utilities as Labour swept to power. This was a ceding of power on the part of the capitalist class to prevent revolution in Britain, and was the same pattern replicated across the European bourgeois democracies. Union membership and freedom was symptomatic of and contingent on this social democratic bourgeois revolution. Now, under conditions of neoliberalism, they're pretty toothless. That's why real socialists are less interested in organisations that mediate the relationship between labour and capital, and are more interested in changing the class character of society. China did this in 1949 with their successful national revolution. That the Chinese are only represented by one union, the All China Federation of Trade Unions, isn't of concern to me or serious socialists. Should the union be criticised? Yes. Emphasis on critical support. But comparing the functions of one union in a proletarian state to the functioning of many unions in a bourgeois equivalent isn't a useful comparison. What Vaush fails to mention is that China's labour conditions are improving, real wages are rising, relative poverty declining, and, I'd wager under the banner of common prosperity, labour are going to be greatly empowered at the expense of capital. Who cares about rights? Rights to unionisation, rights to blah blah, idealist rubbish. It's results that matter, and people's lives are improving in China whilst they worsen day by day in the capitalist West.
I was recently talking, I think you and I disagree on this, but it was about the OPCW gas Syrian attack thing, whatever. Now, I'm of the opinion that it's possible that the investigation was rushed or mishandled, but I don't believe the conspiracy bent in Duma, the idea that the West planted these to justify the targeted airstrikes afterwards. And I was having a conversation with a guy, and he would criticize the report, which is his right to do, but he would not outline the alternative narrative. So he would never say, okay, well, Western agents were sent in, okay, white helmets arrived here to deploy this, or they chipped out the building and sprayed like gas on the, on this wall to make it appear suspicious. They never said that. They would only criticize. And it worries me that we're simultaneously entering an era of unprecedented political radicalism and also not willing to acknowledge it. Like, how do you don't do this, I don't think. Your channel's pretty holistic. How do you respond to that? You can't even criticize them directly.
Listen,
I have no idea how this segues from Vaush's previous ramblings, not a clue. I remember watching Vaush's debate against Jackson Hinkle and being blown away at Vaush's talents in obfuscation. You don't have to outline an alternative series of events in order to blow a hole in an official narrative. This isn't some social media courtroom drama or something. The OPCW failed to convince large amounts of people that their narrative was correct, and we have every right to criticize them for it. If you publish information that admits the views of toxicologists on the ground, and those toxicologists then provide a counter-narrative, that's good enough reason for suspicion of the official narrative. After all, it wouldn't be the first time that imperialists had compiled a dossier to justify Middle Eastern intervention, would it, Vaush?
I have a really, really, really rigid intolerance to groupthink. I think it's really stupid. I think it's so easy to just hop on a bandwagon and say, I'm going to believe all the things that the people with me over here believe. And so, I try my absolute best to evaluate each issue on its own merits. And you're right, there is a portion of the left that any nation that defines themselves as socialist or nominally lefty, they're just sort of given a pass because American imperialism is bad. And therefore, if you're posturing against American imperialism, it's like, well, then you must be one of the good guys. And one of the things I despise across the board is the very overly simplistic good guy, bad guy narrative, whatever it might be. And so you have to handle each issue on its own merits in order to consider yourself a rational, logical thinking human being. And unfortunately, you're right. There's a lot of just like hopping on whatever bandwagon with whatever ideology. And I never like that. And I really value my own independence and my own talking about the issues that, I think are...
No offense, Kyle. I've enjoyed your coverage in the past. But you're not an original thinker. Not even amongst your fraternal YouTube sockdems. And please, the irony of a liberal criticizing Marxists for good guy, bad guy narratives. Precisely the characterization employed by hawks to justify every bloody imperialist war of my lifetime. And every time, there are rad liberal outrider idealists pumping this oversimplification with oxygen. I'm a Marxist. I don't see good guy or bad guy. I see primary imperative contradictions. The essential contradiction globally in the 21st century is between those nation-states who wish to uphold American unipolarity and those nation-states in whose interest it is to usher in an era of multipolarity. The moral temperament of, for instance, Bashar al-Assad doesn't concern me so much as his government's positioning as it relates to the aforementioned primary contradiction. If al-Assad's government serves as an anti-imperialist bulwark against American imperialism in the region, then I critically support it. Once we've transcended American imperialism, then I might think more carefully about the character of al-Assad's government.
I do worry sometimes about anti-American sentiment.
Of course you do, you limp dick imperialist.
Like I said, being anti-American is great, keep up the good work. if you're up to it, as long as it's the right kind, not like, kill all Americans, whatever, but like anti-America as an institution, the statehood, as you said, we've done a lot of bad stuff, but sometimes I feel like so much of the criticism that people levy at America is just from other countries playing their own team sports, like a lot of the anti-America stuff that you get here today has ties to RT. This isn't conspiratorial stuff. Like Russia has its own state interests, of course. We do the same damn thing. But there are people who will do this kind of, like heavy criticism of America in a way which seems like it's just part of geopolitical destabilization, which I find a bit frustrating because it looks sometimes like a left-leaning talking point.
Vaush really sounding like a Fed here. Take notes, kids. Vaush is a psyop. I called it.
But it doesn't really serve the left. It's more of a nihilistic, what would you say, like a lack of faith in democracy as a concept, not just in ours, like a disillusionment. I think, that some people try to cultivate, which is hard to cut through, because once you're really disillusioned, what's the point of political action? Voting won't do anything, which is probably true, but even direct action is, what? And you're on a dying ship.
What the hell is he talking about? It's like the mask slips, or the programming bugs occasionally, then he remembers he's supposed to be an anarchist, who's against bourgeois democracy. This man is a fraud. Back bourgeois democracy or disavow it. Me and the rest of the tanks are going to back proletarian democracy, thank you.
Well, so the foreign policy stuff aside, the Doomerism thing and the nihilism thing is something that has really been frustrating me recently. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you caught, I did a segment on this on my show not too long ago. I don't know if you were able to catch it, but I started the segment by giving people, cause for some hope that, I'm not blowing smoke up people's asses. I was telling the truth. So one of the things was, I forget the exact number, but it's like 23 of 33 elections, 23 or 33 races in the last election, the same night of the McAuliffe race, the DSA won with their candidate. So that's something that's cause for hope. The John Deere strike, which actually went in the direction of workers, that's cause for hope. So I gave a bunch of things that are cause for hope. And then, I made an argument against Doomerism because first of all, we don't have the luxury of being able to throw our hands up and be like, meh, what are we going to do? And also, there is this thing that happens where you can get so cynical and so nihilistic and become such a doomer that all you do is stand on the sidelines and lob bombs at people on the left who are actually trying to make a change. And because you could say they're naive or they're sellouts or they're whatever. And it's like, well, at least they're trying to help the situation.
No. Carl defending the squad here. The squad and their rad-lib media outriders are a pretty garnish on the shit salad of bourgeois democracy, even if we grant them the authenticity that their glitzy entrance onto the stage demanded, which I don't. They're attempting to reform a capitalist system from within, a capitalist congress inside a party that doesn't even nominally represent workers. Read some theory, read some Lenin, come on man. Don't repeat the mistakes of the 20th century. This is no hope territory. Why would any sane anarchist, let alone more informed, educated leftists, side with this reformist garbage? Maybe yes, inside a new party, explicitly geared at workers and with an extensive view to enact revolution of a kind. But in the here and now, with the choice of the two archdukes, Republican and Democrat, Tory and Labour, don't waste the time of the people who really need political change. Don't do it.
And this is this sentiment on the left, which is very self-defeating. I think that the complete and utter lack of solidarity in today's day and age, where everybody on the left is at everybody's throat, and the sense of like doom and nihilism because we weren't able to get Bernie elected, it makes people feel like there's absolutely zero hope. And, I don't agree with that. I don't think we have the luxury of believing that, but also I just fundamentally disagree with it because, just fucking work harder, fight harder. Get out there. I don't care what you do. If you want to join a union, if you want to join the DSA, if you want to do direct issue advocacy on something specific, if you want to go ahead and try to create some third party, which I'm convinced is going to go nowhere. But if you want to try it, at least you're trying something. Go ahead. Go work on that. So that Doomerism stuff is really getting under my skin. And the thing is, people were accusing me of like, you're saying the same thing you've been saying for years. And like, now you're just doing this because this is how you keep your viewers. And it's like, if I went full nihilist, I would get more viewers. Mm-hmm. If I went full doomer, I would get more viewers because that's the prevailing sentiment on the left that people feel that.
Here's a hot take. The real nihilists, the real doomers, the real anti-human intermediaries in the fabric of our body politic are those that uphold bourgeois democracy at the expense of a revolutionary, transformative politics that would allow us to unleash our respective countries' creative potentials. You are the doomer, Kyle. You are the nihilist, Vaush, and we're increasingly wise to it. Your insipid, vacant politics will be history. I will live to see it.
And I'm refusing to do that as a matter of principle because I don't think it's correct. I don't think it's true. And I also never see this shit on the right. When the right hits a setback, they're like, great, I'm just going to fight twice as hard. When the left hits a setback, they throw their arms up and they say, let's tap out. And I don't agree with that. I mean, one of the things that
There is a perverse, unholy commonality that exists on the political right. And it took me a few years to figure out what was commensurable in their different expressions of politics. After reading Marx, I clocked it. Whatever superficial, perfunctory, ideological schisms and inconsistencies may beset the political right, they are undivided in one key respect, and that is that they're all defending the same system or mode of production. They may represent different superstructural outgrowths of that mode of production, but they're well aware, consciously or unconsciously, that they fundamentally defend the same turf, and not only that, they're wise to the dimensions of that turf. The left doesn't even know its own potential because it's balkanized. Too much of the left is trapped in wishful idealism or bourgeois reformism. There is no shared vision. Only Marxist-Leninists, through careful investigation, are those equipped with the tools not only to estimate the dimensions of the enemy political territory, but then to radically transform it and manipulate it to our advantage. What would a coherent denouement look like to the broadly defined left? There isn't one. That's why it's essential that the left is guided by Marxist-Leninist thought. Only then will we know the scope and more precisely the content of what we're fighting for. I think I'm gonna cut it there. Again, the meagerness of Vaush and Kulinski's politics is exposed here. If anyone catches this react video from their space and instinctively senses the vacuity of social democratic politics, I encourage you, engage seriously with socialist history and theory. It will open doors for you. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please, if you enjoyed watching or listening, feel free to share the video around, hit the like button, comment, and of course, subscribe. Remember to hit the notification bell when you subscribe. This is Socialist Quick Fix, signing out. Take care.